morning. Welcome everyone to Automate Live. Our first discussion here, our first in-depth discussion. We're going to be talking about creating a culture that attracts and retains talent. I couldn't be happier for the folks that we have joining me here today to discuss this topic. To my far left, your right, is Travis Miller of Miller Resource Group. We're also joined by Ann Wyatt of Ann Wyatt Recruiting. So excellent to be here. And this is gonna be a bit of a roundtable discussion as we get into it. So my first question, Travis, I'm gonna throw it to you, and then Ann, I'd love to hear from you after this. But the first question is, when it comes to the automation industry, what's one thing you see companies doing well right now when it comes to attracting and retaining talent?
It's a great question, Chris, and great to be up here with you.
Oh, thank you, you as well.
One thing that I've seen companies do more and more lately is focus a lot less on the hard skills. When they're searching for people for their team, they're able to focus more on the soft skills, the culture, the person that they're hiring, and not the resume. And with that, I noticed that when people really focus on the specific background, they have to have A experience, B experience, C experience, this education, and there's no deviating from it. They're really hiring for a person's success in their first 6 months. Because if they have a lot of what you need in their background, but they're missing a good chunk of it too, how much of that can you train in a person's first 3 months, in their first 6 months, and get them ramped up and moving, and they're a great culture fit? Versus if it's only focused on the hard skills, then a person is more likely to be successful quickly, but there's a lot more possibility for that person to be a cultural cancer down the road.
And what would you add to that?
I think those are some great points, Travis. And first of all, Chris, thank you so much for that warm introduction. That's fantastic. Travis, it's great to be here with you as well. Honored to be sitting on this panel with you.
You're making me blush.
I think, to Travis's point, a lot of what he is saying about focusing on the hard skill sets, I'm definitely seeing some shifting and some flexibility there as well. And that is something that I try to nurture too. I'm sure you all try to have those conversations, but for all of our HR friends out there listening today, this is something that you really have to look at and understand. There are some things that, while there's going to be a training and a learning curve anyway, there are other things maybe you're not going to find with the candidate pool and the labor market being so tight right now. So those are important to keep in mind. One thing, though, that I have noticed with companies and hiring as far as culture is that they are also becoming flexible in other ways. And I think that this is a huge win for us in this industry, automation, manufacturing, because traditionally we have been so stringent on making sure that we have this really inflexible schedule, right? You've got your 12s. And I think we have really started to, while in recruiting, we're looking at the person. Now that they're the employee, we're starting to treat them as the person as well. And understanding things came up, we are human. So if we have to leave and come back and run our kiddos somewhere, maybe they get sick, we're free to do that. We're a little bit more flexible on even in interviews. I've seen like a couple, maybe there have been some miscommunications with interview scheduling and things like that. And things happen, and we have to really get there, I think, to understand, things are going to happen. Life is messy. Life is not perfect. And I'm so happy to see that in our industry. I'm so happy to see that growth there. That's something I'm proud of.
I like the first two things you said, Travis. You brought up the shift from focusing just on hard skills to focusing more on soft skills. And I think it's great that you brought up flexibility, right? It can, if let's say you're a caregiver, let's say you're a single parent, right? A traditional manufacturing job with the traditional hours might not be the fit that you were looking for back in the day. Since the topic of conversation here is what are companies doing right now when it comes to their culture, the thing I'll add is I think that manufacturing companies are doing a great job of showcasing the people that work for the company and elevating the personal brands of the folks that are there. Travis, at Miller Resource Group, you are an example of a company that I see does a really good job of humanizing your company because each individual in your organization is very forward-facing. I see a lot of their personality in it, and I think that gives me an overall vision of the type of company that Miller Resource is. And I'm glad to see that this isn't a trend just across, like, say, a recruiting firm like yours, but automation companies, robotics companies. I'm seeing more great examples of leaders elevating the people there and that contributing to the overall culture as well. Because as someone that worked for a company for a long time before I started my own business, one of the things that attracted me to working with that organization was I was able to share my own voice and elevate the organization while I was there.
Well, I think it's one of the best ways to advertise your company culture. You know, you spend so much money, time, and investment marketing their product to their customers. But it's really difficult to market your company as a place to go and work, to market your employment brand. And the best way to do that is to allow your people to be themselves and put themselves out there to be your brand ambassador. And if you follow Miller Resource Group, if you follow the people at Miller Resource Group, and you see John Freeman in his ghillie suit posting these wild videos about hunting for sales engineers, you kind of get a feeling for what our company culture is. And if you prefer an environment that is relatively buttoned up and incredibly professional, well, Miller Resource Group might not be the place for you. But if you can get excited about the technology of the companies that we're working with, and you see voices like mine, like John's, out there showcasing their personality of who we are, then people who are looking for companies like ours can get excited about it. And if people are interviewing with us and they check us out, they're going to get a good sense of who we are and whether or not we're an organization that they could get excited about being a part of.
Yeah, I see that a lot too, Travis, and I think that kind of plays into company branding on a larger scale. But for example, you know, if I have an organization out there, what are your thoughts on 2 or 3 people representing that organization as opposed to, like, how do you make it more about the collective representation of your organization?
That's a great question and kind of a difficult one to answer because you don't want to force it on anyone. You know, there are plenty of people out in this world who are wildly successful at what they do, and creating content just isn't in their purview. It's not something they want to do. It's not something they're particularly good at. It's not a skill set they're interested in developing. And that's fine. It's not for everybody. One thing I did a couple of years ago in height of pandemic, and we bought into this, you know, personal branding, creating content. But I knew that a lot of people, that's not their skill set. But we're so comfortable on camera these days. Zoom calls are a thing. And so that was how I started the podcast 2 or 3 years ago, was as a vehicle to help our people create content. So originally, I was just going to interview the people at our company because they can talk to me. Just turn on the camera like it's a Zoom call. We're going to chat, and we're going to get some good pieces of content. There's going to be plenty of great ideas to put out there into the world. I work with some very, very smart people, much smarter than me. They have great ideas. I do an okay job of getting those ideas out of people. And then it kind of snowballed, but if you can help people create content to help get their story out there about who they are, what role they play in an organization, not only from a business perspective, but from a heart perspective as well, I think that's something that leadership can do to help amplify the voice of their people. Versus if you're reliant on 1 or 2 people doing it all, then you're not really getting the voice of the company. You're getting the voice of part of it, and unfortunately you lose the risk of that voice going away if that's all people are used to seeing.
One thing that I think of when it comes to the different voices, the different personalities at an organization, to this question, and when we're talking about, hey, does it make sense to have, let's say, the culture be representative of 1 of 2 individuals there or many individuals at the company? As a longtime salesperson, I always think of this in the context of sales first and foremost, where the big strengths of having personal brands showcasing your culture, all of a sudden, you know, if you're going after multiple markets, I feel like something I hear from sales folks or marketers is like, oh, well, everyone would buy our product, right? food and beverage, automotive, you name your industry, right? Everyone's attractive to us. It's like, well, first of all, you kind of got to pick a lane. You're going to be more successful if you niche down. But one of the beautiful things about having personal brands being showcasing the people within an organization, maybe one person is the automotive expert. Maybe one person is the semiconductor expert. So all of a sudden, you're able to go after those markets or be seen as more trustworthy to those markets because they see a human that really understands that industry. Since we're talking about culture and attracting and retaining talent, the same thing I feel goes for people in that regard that you'd want to bring onto your team. Maybe someone's a little more technical. Maybe they're more so the engineering type. That's going to be great for attracting the next engineer to your organization. Maybe they see that forward-thinking marketer, that forward-thinking salesperson. That can attract the next breed of marketers and salespeople to an organization. At least those are some of my thoughts.
I got a question about that because I think that can be difficult for a lot of people because a lot of the people who are more comfortable doing stuff like this, being in front of a camera, are the salespeople, are the people in marketing who have that skill set. And they generally don't have as much technical knowledge as a lot of the engineers, product development, operations people. How do they create technical content that is valuable to their industry when their expertise isn't necessarily the technical side of it, but how to sell or brand or market the technical piece of it?
So I can speak to that a little bit if that's all right. But I've seen several companies leverage their HR departments and the recruiting departments within their organizations to do some content creation, or maybe the marketing department does the content creation, but then they do kind of their own kind of like influencing thing. And then it supports and builds the brand on an individual level. Those individuals build up a following, but then they also have other members of the organization always engaging into the content. So maybe it's somebody that, you have that individual who's more introverted and they don't want to make content. That's not their thing, right? But then you leverage your HR department to kind of be that influencing arm and have other employees engage. And I think this is a great opportunity for the technical side of things, because that's true. I think that when you're going out and you're recruiting, you're looking for specific individuals that fit a specific skill set. I think that you have to really showcase your company and what you do. So I love it when I see companies and brands out there not only leveraging their HR department, their recruiting department to do this, but I love it when they're going out on the floor and they're taking content on the floor. And I love it when they're going out on the floor and they're getting employee testimonials from the floor. And those people, maybe they work in different departments of the plant. Maybe they're machine operators. Maybe they're forklift driver. Maybe they're in quality. But having that myriad of voices can really impact your culture, your brand awareness, and also really people see that and they're like, I want to go work there because that looks like a really nice place to work. It looks like they really care about their people. And I think, at the end of the day in recruiting, that's a huge box on candidates' lists when they're looking. Do you come across that?
Yeah, that's a really good point and I think the companies that almost worry about it less, like they're just going to do it. You see so many organizations have these beautifully produced corporate brand cultural videos, and they're wonderful. But they do them once every 2 or 3 years. It lives on their website. It lives buried on a YouTube channel mainly, but people don't see it unless they're seeking it. Versus, if you don't really worry about it, you just like to showcase your people and your company and you're proud of the voices and the culture, and you do it regularly on an ad hoc basis, just very unprofessionally. You just need a phone to do it. That's where you can really capture what the essence of a company's culture is.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you're saying, authentic content, real content. Yes, have the polished corporate branding, if you will. People need a logo. They need that so the company is recognizable, and there needs to be consistency there. One thing I like that you brought up, just taking out your phone and using that to create content, because I think some people often get worried that if they say the wrong thing one more time, like if they say the wrong thing one time, that's going to be the piece of content that goes viral and it's going to derail everything they've ever built up to that point. The reality is it's probably not going to happen because like most content doesn't go viral, right? What I see as a successful thing is you just iterate, right? Maybe someone who has a personal brand at that company and has an audience and has a voice, maybe they say something that's 75% in line with the company brand, right? Don't get upset at them for that. Be like, hey, I love that piece of content. I love this and that. You know, hey, next time let's tweak this a little bit because that makes it more of a, hey, let's keep doing this and let's keep being consistent, getting the word out about our organization, showcasing the culture. And I think you brought up a great point about leveraging the HR department. I think it's leveraging other groups that maybe, we were giving the example of a technical individual that's maybe not as camera facing as we are, but at the end of the day, you can extract knowledge from them and still showcase what that person knows. Maybe it's you're interviewing them for a blog post, right? And you're going to showcase their knowledge that way. One trick I like doing is I always film the behind the scenes before I actually hit record as well, because you might get some candid feedback from that person or some candid insights that just feel really supernatural that might not have come out if that person knew they had already gone live, right? In worst case scenario, you don't use that content, but those are a couple tricks I've seen as being a way to get more of that out there. I'm going to shift gears here with our next discussion because we're here, we're live at Automate with the Association for Advancing Automation. And one of the things I have to ask is this is a showcase of technology, but I also feel like events like this are a showcase of culture. What do you glean from, what do you learn about people's culture while you're here at an event?
That's a good question. And I think that it's how do you see individuals interact with each other in their booth? You know, because in this day and age with so many people working outside of the office, working all across the country, there's a good chance this is one of only a handful of times that they're all together throughout the year. And if you're looking at an organization and you see people working together, you see them collaborating, you see them talking to customers together, I think you get a pretty good sense of how that organization works together versus if you see a handful of people sitting apart from each other, scrolling on their phone, answering emails. You also get a good sense of how they work together. What do you see?
Can I tell you a story, Travis?
I love stories.
Okay. So we were at an event earlier this year, and some of our other friends were there as well. But we were just kind of walking through the main hallway there, the entrance, as we go there, and we see this person that is dressed up in something very not what you would expect at a trade show. And they looked like John Lennon. And we were like, why is this person dressed up like this? And then we see a couple more. And these people are dressed up, as different things. We follow them. We are so curious. And we followed them back to their booth. And I love this story because when we got back to the booth, we found out that every year that sales team in that booth picked a different theme and dressed up. And that year it was the Beatles. And it was just really cool because they were all so you could tell they were so into it. And I love to see that because to me, I'm walking away from that booth and I'm like, you know what, that is something special,
What era Beatles were they dressed up as?
There was, I believe, the Yellow Submarine.
Okay.
We saw that, and we saw the Yoko era.
Oh gosh.
And we saw
You're saying they covered the spectrum of Beatle lore,
every
basically.
single one of them was dressed up as a different Beatle era, and it was just fantastic. It was just such a feel-good moment.
Well, I think this showcases that there are very tangible embodiments of culture, right? There's dressing up, there's having a theme to the booth, for example. That's one thing you can get out of being at the event. And Travis, you also just talked about, honestly, it kind of goes back to your initial conversation around soft skills. What are the soft things that are happening at the booth that are showcasing? How does this team work together? Are people disengaged? Are they on their phones? Or do you have a group that's really like, oh, we're glad you're here. So-and-so is an expert in this area. You got to talk to them. Is there laughing? Is there, it's almost like an intangible vibe you get when you walk into that booth.
Well, isn't that the essence of what culture is? It's how people work together. Everything else is just this, almost a symptom of what the culture is. Culture isn't, I'm sick of the example, but it's not ping pong tables. But
Yeah.
it can be a sign of it. If it's an organization that really likes not only working together, but playing together, spending time together, doing activities together, a ping pong table actually can be part of the culture. It's when corporate says, here's a ping pong table, this is our culture, that's
They define
when
the
it's window
thing,
dressing.
and they're replacing, the connection with a thing.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it could be the ping pong table. I think I'll double down on it's almost the feeling you get when you walk into a booth, when you walk into an office. Like when I walk into the Miller Resource Group office, like you got the mural in the back, you've got collaboration, you have a podcast studio. It feels like a place where creativity thrives. And I think that's the type of thing, whether it's creativity, whether it's innovation, there are a lot of feelings you can get there, but you want it to embody some type of feeling. And Ann, we'll start with you on this one. When it comes to recruiting, how do you work with teams on prioritizing skill sets amongst the hiring team? This is on really more the recruiting side, and I think both of you will be able to talk to this significantly better than I could.
So that is something that I think Travis kind of started our discussion with. That's something that I still see a little bit resistance in. As a recruiter, and Travis knows this very well, but as a recruiter, when you're taking a job order and you're meeting with the client, it's really important that you sit down with them and you look at things like hard skill set and soft skill set. And you identify things like what, not just the hard skills, but what KPIs, for example, that they're going to have to meet. What is the culture like? Who is going to be a good fit for this role? So one of the things that I really try to do when I'm working with that client one-on-one is I want to prioritize their entire list. Now, with a hiring team, obviously, you've got multiple people that come into play when they're sitting together and they're like trying to make a hiring decision about one candidate. And so multiple people may have different things that they're looking for. So really getting everyone on that same page and having those honest conversations that I'm sure Travis has had to have a lot of as well, and really say, okay, I understand everyone's needs. We need your top 3. We need your top 5. So that's something that I try to do, is just basically mini list build and identify, okay, what are our must-haves, right? And can we all agree on what those must-haves are?
The conversation I like to have with people is, tell me about the absolute worst background possible that you would consider for this job, that could be successful at this job. Okay, so this is the absolute bare minimum somebody would need in order to be barely successful. All right, let's talk to everybody with that and above. Because if you tell me about the background of somebody who's wildly successful, tell me about the absolute perfect skill set in order to excel at this job. The window's about this big. But if you say, okay, I want to talk to everybody who could barely do this job and above, then your window is so much bigger, and then you get to focus on all of this stuff. Because when you search for people, all you can really search for at the beginning is their background. It's not until you talk to them that you can dig into everything else. And that's the stuff that usually is most important to a person's potential for incredible success with an organization.
I think this is a good segue to our final question of the discussion, which is, when it comes to creating that culture that attracts and retains talent, what is an actionable piece of advice that you would give that manufacturers, industrial companies, folks in this industry, that they could implement today or tomorrow or very quickly? Travis, let's go down and then we'll work our way back this way.
I think I'm going to give you a really bad answer on this. I don't think there's any one thing they can do when they get back from this show or after listening to this episode that's going to have a dramatic impact in the near future. But it's a choice. It's the choice to be able to articulate your values. as a leader in an organization or somebody supporting the leader, and if your leader can't articulate your company's values, if you're supporting that leader, you need to get them to be able to do it, because that is the essence of what the culture is. What are the values of your organization, and how do people who hold those values work together? I guess that is the one thing. Either be able to articulate it, and if you can't, start.
I actually think that's a great answer, because you gave the disclaimer that you can't go back tomorrow and make a dramatic shift. But a great step one is to make sure that you can articulate those values. So great way to start us off. Anne, what would you add?
Really quickly, I agree with Travis. I mean, culture change is from the top down, and it is not an overnight quick fix. I do think that when you're working, especially if you're in HR or a department like that, and you're having this battle, right, with your ops, I think one thing that you can do is you can start collecting data. You can start collecting people analytics. You can start defining, okay, yes, we do have a culture problem, and then bring that data and present it, just like we would with machinery.
What kind of data are you collecting?
Attendance, retention. Okay, when you place a job, how long does it take to fill? What's the reason for the fill? Those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll add, I'm actually going to take a different spin, because Travis, I really like the way you did it. I think there's some companies that probably really need to upgrade their culture. Maybe it's not where it needs to be today. I'm going to answer this for the folks that maybe have a good culture but just haven't showcased it the right way yet. And my advice is to showcase it. Like, I give this example all the time. Travis, you talked about this. This is a great tool for getting information about your culture out there. Film a video, send a tweet, whatever it is. There are different ways you can start getting that message out on a regular basis and make it a consistent message, whether it's your CEO that's sharing that message, whether it's a more junior team member sharing that message. I think going back to what we talked about earlier, culture really is the embodiment of values and a number of different people there, and there are a lot of ways to get that out on a regular basis through social media, through blogging, through videos, whatever it may be. So great advice across the board. Thank you both for kicking off our first main discussion here at Automate Live. We're going to be back for more really soon. I'm Chris Luecke with Manufacturing Happy Hour. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.